everyone, Scott Butler from Edge Financial Services. I hope you're all well. Taking a little afternoon walk in the suburb of Montebello, North Merida, on the Yucatan Peninsula. Nice little area, nice big houses, like some crazy big houses, like a whole, I'd probably say there's some houses in this suburban area that might be like 2 and 3 acres with 4-meter walls all around, like a big family compound. Yeah, pretty interesting. Everyone's got dogs. Well, they all keep them behind big gates. Thank you, dog. Anyway, look guys, I've been getting a lot of questions about interest rates and what my thoughts are on interest rates moving forward and where we should be positioned and that sort of thing. And so, look, I'm sure everyone's been talking about it, you know, the smarter people than me are having some conversations too, but I'm trying to get my head around it for all my clients as well. And so nobody really knows what's going to happen, except maybe the Fed and some of the people that rule the world and the biggest banks and families that lend money to the Fed that actually create those decisions. Those guys probably know what's going on. We don't. I guess we've got to look at a few factors and try and be more aware of things we might see, as in, you know, indicators that might be available to us to have a look at as we move forward. I think Europe is going to be a big play. If Europe actually collapses like we think it will, like they've basically committed suicide with the green energy policies, and now it's coming down, you know, it's coming to fruition. If they actually do collapse, I think that will be the trigger for the US Reserve Bank to maybe pull back on their trajectory of rate rises, irrespective of how much inflation's in the system. I think we need to get our head around the fact that the reason for the interest rate increases isn't solely inflation. In fact, governments, and especially the US government, who has the most debt in the world, like inflation, because it inflates the debt away. It's an easy thing to do. They can just inflate the debt away and they don't have to do any hard, you know, taxes or tightening of policy or actually, you know, being responsible with their money. They can just use inflation to reduce their debt down. So actually letting inflation run is actually what I think they're going to do. I don't think they're trying to really tame inflation too much. They're probably trying to get it to look so it looks in some fashion responsible. Because if they didn't, you know, lean on the Reserve Bank as well, while inflation was running at 15% in the US like it is, real inflation, then everyone will be like saying, hey, what are you guys doing? The gig's up. We know that you're letting this run on purpose. So they've got to look like they're not doing that on purpose. But they will. This will help them come out of so much debt. The problem that the US has is that they've enjoyed being the reserve currency for 50 years, and so they could just borrow money willy-nilly. Whenever there was someone debt rollout on, which is all the time, they could always get some country or some company to buy their bonds, which is basically lend them money, right? And the reason is because anytime anyone around the world buys a barrel of oil, they've got to buy US dollars to trade it in. That's the deal. And so the petrodollar has meant that America could borrow money consistently. There would always be someone to borrow from to refinance their old debts. So all they're doing is rolling their debts over. Yeah, refinancing, just like we do with housing and stuff. If something happens, if somebody came along and decided that they could sell oil or other commodities and not use the US dollars, like China, Russia, India, Saudi Arabia and Iran are doing now, then there's not as big a demand for the US currency, for US bonds. So that's going to put the US in a big pickle, because most of their debt is between 3 and 5 year rollovers. They've got to sell that debt. They've got to roll it over or default and then put in warships somewhere, which is probably what they've done in the past. But they've got to make their currency attractive to people who want to borrow from lend them money. So the only way they can do that is to give a reasonable rate of return to those people who want to borrow or buy their bonds. That's why the interest rates are going up. That's why they're going to keep pushing them up. And I think while there's some thoughts about whether they're going to be the #1 currency or not, they're going to keep jacking the rates up, and Australia's going to follow. Nothing to do with inflation. You know, probably 3 or 4 months ago, I stood up and said, look, I don't think the Reserve Bank will go much more past Christmas because they won't want to crash the economy. I'm happy to change my view because the information has changed. It has nothing to do with the economy. The Reserve Bank of Australia is happy to crash it, like the US is happy to crash their economy, because it's a currency war. And the reason Australia has to do it is because we have to have our currency at least in some reasonable range to the US dollar. We need to be about at least 65 or 60 cents. Otherwise our inflation would run rampant as well. So for all those people out there who are like going, oh Scott, that's all terrible news. I can just see the rates going up and up and up. Look, it is what it is. What I'm trying to do is make sure that we understand why it's happening, because if we think that it's actually about inflation, which is only about oil and gas and the fact that money was printed and made for free in the last 2 years, you know, part of the COVID wars, well, then we're being misguided, because this is step 2. This is like the currency wars. This is what happens now. The US is fighting to keep their currency relevant, and they have to offer people a reasonable return. Otherwise, people will go and buy yuan and buy oil in yuan or ruble or gold, which is, in theory, probably going to have a bit of a push later on. So this is where I see, this is the indicators that I think we should be looking for interest rates. How far are they going to go? No one knows. No one knows. I really do think it depends on Europe collapsing. It will collapse. It just depends on when and by how much. So I think if we can watch those indicators, when Europe really does collapse, I think the US could probably justify slowing down the rate rises. And the reason is because they wouldn't need to incentivize their currency as much, because someone else around the corner their currency looks worse than the US dollar, which would be the euro. No one's going to want to buy euro bonds, because they're basically going back to the dark ages, chopping firewood to keep warm. You know, things we haven't done for 100 years. So, anyway guys, look, people keep asking me, interest rates, Scott, what's happening with them? That's kind of what's happening. Where are they going to go to? You know, I don't know. All we can do is try and keep an eye on some indicators and try and get a bit of an understanding of what are the possibilities and where it might go to from there. How are we going to profit? Pretty tough, guys. I think first off is security. You know, people always say, Scotty, how do we profit in all this turmoil and panic? Yeah, there's always some ways, but first, let's make sure we don't lose any money. How about that? So, you know, coming into a position of security, I think is sometimes just as good as, hey Scotty, how do we profit from everyone else's pain? You know, bar shorting stocks and, you know, going along on some gold miners and things. I think positioning in with understanding debt, like inflation-linked bonds from certain companies, certain energy companies, rare earths. Rare earths are an interesting position, but if you want to protect your wealth, and it's just sitting there, I would think that having money in the bank and watching it go backwards at 8% a year with inflation is a tough call, unless you're putting it there ready to deploy it when some pain comes. Or maybe you should go and buy some gold and silver coins and stick it in a safe somewhere on your property. Worst things can be done, the original money. So anyway guys, look, that's enough from me coming to you from Merida. Just thought I want to answer that about the interest rates, and we'll keep a watch and we'll keep you updated. All right, see ya.